Minotaur is a disgusting-looking version of a dairy cow who lives a simple life until a shoddy arrives to hunt him down. When Minotaur tries to communicate, he accidentally confesses to her. The baddie, who has never been confessed to before, instantly falls in love and now wants Minotaur's meat, while he is completely oblivious to the fact that he has signed a verbal marriage contract. The story begins with the Minotaur chilling with the forest animals when suddenly, he sees a rabbit French kissing the ground, causing it to cry. Luckily, the Minotaur manages to treat the rabbit's wound and makes the pain go away. Just then, a fairy comes flying, telling Minotaur that the humans have come. This confuses him as he can't figure out what business humans could have in the forest. Soon after, he makes eye contact with one of the humans, and they begin calling him the ruler of the forest. But to their surprise, the Minotaur tries to disappear just like your morals after 3 shots of tequila. At the same time, the fairy can't understand why the Minotaur is hiding as well and ultimately concludes that he might be scared of the humans. One of the knights decides to go and confront the Minotaur, and without hesitation, he swings his sword, trying to slash the poor lad. Shockingly, the sword breaks upon impact, freaking out all the knights present. This causes the fairy to boast about Minotaur's strength, while the knights decide to head back at one. Suddenly, the Red Riding Hood appears, takes off her hood and questions if they really want to retreat. Everyone began calling her captain and reassuring that they weren't exactly scared or anything. Out of nowhere, she swings her sword at the knights standing in front of her and without harming them, cuts the trees behind them effortlessly. The knights can't believe that she just cut down trees using her sword, and she advises to properly maintain the sword so they can cut things like this as well. After they are done apologizing to the captain, she orders them to get back as she is capable of handling it on her own. At first, the knights try to argue with her, but ultimately decide to leave the shorty alone with the beast. Following that, she tells Minotaur that she's not used to handling subordinates and prefers flying solo. Then, she challenges him to a one-on-one battle with her, but the fairy begins pressuring Minotaur to run away as the girl is called Ruvine. Apparently, she is the strongest adventurer of mankind, and no monster has ever defeated her. Suddenly, the fairy gets an idea to tell Ruvine that they aren't bad monsters and decides to express it with actions as they can't speak human language. She then brings out a book that Ruvine's subordinates dropped and tells Minotaur to give it back to Ruvine while greeting her. Additionally, she has heard that humans greet while holding hands and forces Minotaur to do the same. Ultimately, he agrees and goes near Ruvine, showing her the book in his hand. Ruvine can't understand why the ruler of the forest is giving her a book. Furthermore, what she doesn't get is the part of the book the Minotaur is pointing to, and after focusing on the page, Ruvine realizes that he's asking her to marry him. This comes as a surprise to her as Ruvine can't figure out why the Minotaur is confessing to her all of a sudden. After staring at him for a moment, she understands what he means and takes out her sword, saying that he must be trying to get access to her kitty. Minotaur freaks out while the fairy blames him for angering her even more. He then questions what they should do, and the fairy advises him to hold hands, deciding to act as a decoy and give Minotaur an opening. She then begins trying to scare Ruvine, which gives Minotaur the chance to hold hands with Ruvine. While he looks at her terrified, Ruvine begins to blush and can barely speak. Minotaur wonders if this is enough to save them when suddenly, he gets slapped on the face by Ruvine, who ends up running away afterward. While the two of them are confused about what just happened, Ruvine also can't figure out what's the deal with Minotaur and wonders if he was truly interested in her. Just when those two think that they are safe, Ruvine appears once again and decides to return tomorrow, agreeing to listen to whatever he has to say. With that being said, she begins walking away, not knowing that they couldn't understand a word. Elsewhere, the people in the city begin pointing at a girl, talking about how she could be even cuter than Ruvine. However, the thing they don't realize is that the girl is Ruvine herself, just in a casual dress this time. Apparently, what happened is that when she walked away, the fairy and Minotaur realized that she must have been scared of the book. Meanwhile, Ruvine couldn't understand what her next step should be and ended up returning home, where she was greeted by her little sister. However, she ignores her and heads inside her room. Once inside, Ruvine begins freaking out, realizing that Minotaur is the target she needs to eliminate, but is now at wit's end because of a confession she's not experienced with. Eventually, she decides to calm down for a moment and figures that a promise is a promise. Ruvine then decides to listen to what Minotaur has to say, friendzone him and head back home. But even if Ruvine's rejecting him, she needs to wear something different and thinks that she needs to be serious considering how serious Minotaur is. Ultimately, Ruvine ends up wearing a party dress along with a hat and notices that it doesn't look so bad after all. After that, she begins staring herself in the mirror and practicing how things might go the next day while her little sister secretly peeks, confused that her sister is finally acting like a girl. The next morning, she dresses up once again, making the little sister wonder if she's going on a date. On the other hand, Minotaur thinks about how Ruvine ran away as soon as she looked at the book and wonders if it's a magical book and an unbelievable weapon. Additionally, he figures that he might just win against Ruvine as long as he has the book. Just then, the fairy comes flying, informing Minotaur that Ruvine has returned and asks him to come with her as something seems off. Afterward, the two of them look at Ruvine in confusion, and before long, she notices them as well. Hesitantly, Ruvine greets Minotaur by saying good morning and thinks how she'll quickly reject him. After a while, she can't believe why the Minotaur is taking so long, but all he can do is stand there, looking confused. Ruvine begins to wonder if the Minotaur already hates her now, while the fairy talks about how they should have thought about a will beforehand. Suddenly, they remember that the book is what drove her away last time, but Minotaur doesn't know how to use it. Nonetheless, he decides to give it a shot and opens a random page once again. This time, the page seems to be complimenting her dress, and after reading it, Ruvine replies that she doesn't dislike that part of Minotaur that's honest with everything. Seeing her turn red makes them wonder if Ruvine is getting her, and to finish things off, Minotaur once again flips a random page. This page says that he has been searching all his life for a princess like her. After reading the text, Ruvine can't help but get flustered and thinks about how it's her first time hearing something like this. She then figures that it must be flattery and concludes that if he says so, then it must be true. Looking at her reaction makes Minotaur think that it seems pretty off, and the fairy mentions that she must be trying to self-detonate. Realizing that she's a human, Minotaur believes that she can actually do it, and the fairy questions if Ruvine is going to destroy the whole forest if she thinks she's going to lose. Thinking that they are pretty much doomed to die, Minotaur gets an idea and decides to take Ruvine out of the forest. The fairy tells him that he might die, but Minotaur believes that he must do it. Just then, Ruvine takes off her hat and after thanking him, runs away once again. This confuses the two of them once again while Ruvine hides behind a tree, thinking how embarrassing it was. A few days later, the people of the town noticed Ruvine burning with rage, ready to defeat the ruler of the forest at all costs. She seems mad about showing him her wearing such a frilly outfit, which is why she plans to make total mincemeat out of him. On the other hand, the fairy is flying around, searching for Minotaur. Seeing how she's on her own, the fairy thinks about how it will be dangerous if Ruvine comes by, and is sure that without her, Minotaur will surely be defeated. Just then, she hears some rustling in the bushes and decides to check it out, thinking that it might be Minotaur. But to her surprise, the person behind the bush turns out to be Ruvine. Both of them stare at each other for a second, and without wasting any time, the fairy decides to flee. However, Ruvine manages to catch her before she flies away, making her think that it's all over for her. But all Ruvine wants is to ask her something and questions if Minotaur didn't make any remarks about her, like her dress perfectly suiting her or her jugs not being big enough for his taste. Just then, Ruvine notices the fairy crying and instantly lets go, wondering if she hurt her. She then remembers that they can't communicate without the book, while the fairy thinks why Ruvine isn't eliminating her. Ultimately, she concludes that Ruvine must be planning on taking her hostage. That is why she needs to run away, or she'll definitely be consumed as a side dish. Meanwhile, Ruvine begins talking to her about Minotaur liking her and how it's impossible for rivals to be in love. Furthermore, she begins reassuring her that she doesn't think much of him or anything. Simultaneously, the fairy notices a coat of fur behind the bush, and thinking that it's Minotaur, she instantly flies towards it. However, that fur turns out to be the hair of a zesty-looking dude, causing the fairy to freak out. Instantly, that dude ends up catching the fairy and mentions how he came spirit hunting just for the hell of it. Additionally, he thinks that selling the fairy will earn him enough bread to pay off his debt. While the fairy yells at Minotaur for not being with her at times like this, the Afro dude gets punched in the face by Ruvine, surprising the fairy. She then reminds the Afro dude that it's a crime to capture fairies on his own, and says that laying a hand on her companion is unforgivable. Seeing her face causes the man to bawl and instantly bow in front of her, asking for forgiveness. To his surprise, Ruvine gives him a bag of coins, saying that it should help pay off his debt. The zesty dude thanks Ruvine and walks away, promising never to forget her kindness. Following that, the fairy questions why Ruvine saved her, and after asking the fairy if she's okay, Ruvine mentions that she has forgotten what she was worried about and leaves. Soon after, Minotaur returns, informing the fairy that he harvested some nice fruits. However, the fairy punches him in the face and continues striking him until she is satisfied. When Minotaur asks the reason behind her anger, she tells him that Ruvine came by. When he questions where she is, the fairy replies that she already left and comments that Ruvine might not be such a bad person. When Minotaur questions what the fairy means, she replies that it's hard to explain, but Ruvine ended up saving her. This is what the fairy told Minotaur yesterday, but he isn't sure what happened. Nonetheless, as she saved the fairy, Minotaur decides to properly thank her, but realizes that he might end up cosplaying Gojo if he did. He then assumes that Ruvine isn't a bad person and wonders if she's fighting to protect someone. Just then, he hears a human voice and decides to take a look. Meanwhile, someone calls out Ruvine's name, and it turns out to be a boy named Bobble. He asks Ruvine why she is addressing him like a stranger, and they start talking about how it's been about 2 years since they saw each other. Turns out, Bobble is going towards the forest and decides to tag along Ruvine, to which she agrees. While walking towards the forest, Ruvine begins thinking about the past when she and her sister went to the guild, and she reassured that little sister that she can register as long as she's 14 and then they will eat some delicious food. Eventually, she goes up to the receptionist, and when the receptionist asks Ruvine about her age, Ruvine replies that she's 14 and can fight as long as she has a sword. However, the receptionist mentions that being an adventurer is an extremely dangerous job, and it's quite a hassle to verify the identity of adventurers with obscure backgrounds. That is why they don't register people who are likely to bite the dust in no time. This causes everyone to laugh at Ruvine when out of nowhere, Bobble appears, talking as if he knows Ruvine already. Ruvine looks at him, confused, and Bobble makes an excuse, saying that Ruvine is his niece. This makes the receptionist agree to register her and ask for Ruvine's name. Following that, Bobble treats both Ruvine and her little sister with some drinks and asks them to join his party in exchange. Ruvine can't believe that he is okay with taking her, to which Bobble replies that they are comrades after all. Ruvine started to notice that he was strangely intimate with her and was friends with everyone as well. When he used to laugh, everyone else did too. Apparently, he also taught her a lot of things and even gave her one of his extra swords. In order not to hold her comrades, Ruvine did her best to learn and eventually became capable enough to beat monsters on her own. However, her party didn't look really happy with her achievement, but the people at the guild showered her with praise for defeating a dragon on her own. However, Ruvine told them that it's thanks to the sword Bobble gave her. Following that, she continued to fight with that sword so others could relax, and ultimately got quite a huge sum of money as a reward. But when she went to show the reward to her party members, they didn't look excited or anything, and Bobble told her that the reward was all hers. Additionally, he mentions that she's becoming too much of a hero, which is why her party ended up leaving her. This transitioned into her being called the greatest lone adventurer. Back in the present, Bobble notices that she is still using his sword and gets told that she has replaced the sword blade several times. Bobble then asks her to show him the sword, and after she gives it to him, Bobble tries to attack her and Ruvine barely manages to dodge the attack. When she questions the reason behind this sudden attack, the Boba Tea named loser says that the sword used to be cheap, but now is worth a ton because she has it. Furthermore, he tells Ruvine that he despises her, saying that it was a mistake taking her in just because she was a chick. Afterward, he points his crossbow at Ruvine, questioning why she is stronger than him, and that because of her, all the other baddies dumped his pathetic self as well. He then prepares to shoot, telling her to die so he can make some money out of it. Out of nowhere, Minotaur appears in front of Ruvine. Bobble quickly realizes that his crossbow isn't working on the Minotaur. After giving Bobble a serious glare, Minotaur offers his hand to Ruvine, and she instantly grabs it. Following that, the two of them run while Minotaur thinks that Bobble must have done something to Ruvine. The two of them continued to run really far away, and Minotaur noticed that Ruvine's hand felt more feeble than the first time he held it. After running a safe distance away, Ruvine asks Minotaur why he saved her and ends up crying while resting against the Minotaur. Later, Ruvine sits there, sighing with the fairy in her hand. The fairy can't figure why she got captured this time and doesn't seem to care any longer. Apparently, Ruvine wanted to express her gratitude and wanted to ask the fairy if Minotaur liked something. However, she is sure that the only thing Minotaur might want is her cake. Additionally, she thinks that even if Minotaur is a perv who likes human girls, he might not actually be a bad person. Furthermore, Ruvine realizes that she probably misunderstood him a little. Seeing her face makes the fairy wonder if Ruvine is embarrassed and if she likes her by any chance. At the same time, Minotaur thinks about the moment when he grabbed Ruvine's hand and how it felt weak. At that time, she wasn't the Ruvine who is always strong and frightening, but was someone who was fragile and could shatter from a single touch. Minotaur further wonders why he felt the need to protect her and asks himself if he's protecting everyone in the forest because they are weak. This makes him think if Ruvine really is a strong and frightening human in the first place and figures that he had the wrong impression of her up until now. Minotaur then regrets attacking her with the magical book, but quickly remembers the slap he received the other day. Just then, he notices himself standing right next to Ruvine. The two of them look at each other for a moment, and the Minotaur questions why she is there. Additionally, he notices the fairy in her arms and ultimately decides to sit down and examine the situation for a bit. Following that, Ruvine notices some birds sitting on a branch and Minotaur, noticing this, realizes that she might like birdies. This results in him making the birds sit on his hand and showing them to Ruvine with a smile on his face. Ruvine ends up coming closer and eventually touching the birds, which causes her to brighten up instantly. After playing with the birdies for a while, she thanks Minotaur for saving her yesterday, saying that the two of them could at least become friends. But when Minotaur asks the fairy what she's saying, the fairy replies that Ruvine is asking if he's an ox. Confused, Minotaur tries reassuring Ruvine that he is not an ox, only for Ruvine to yell, saying that they won't ever fall in love. Seeing her yell confuses him, and the fairy replies that it's because he's claiming not to be an ox. But at the same time, the Minotaur also thinks that he has gotten closer to Ruvine and is sure that they have now become friends. The next day, Minotaur notices a bunny reading the book and snatches it away, saying that this book drives away enemies and is dangerous. But the fairy argues that the rabbit seems fine, and after looking at it, notices that she does feel something. Following that, the fairy comments that her body is light as a feather, and says that it can heal one's comrades as well. However, Minotaur realizes that he doesn't get such a feeling and asks Ruvine to look at that page. After taking a closer look, the page says something about spending sweet moments together. The next day, at her house, Ruvine is busy making sweets, thinking about Minotaur having a sweet tooth. She shapes the cookies like rabbits, and after baking them, nicely packs all of them in a bag. Later that day, she appears in the forest again, and where the fairy gives her a hug, saying that Ruvine must be thinking how super adorable the fairy looks. Then, Ruvine offers one of the cookies to her, wondering how they taste as she hasn't tested them yet. Noticing the scent coming out of them, the fairy concludes that it must be candy, and after taking a bite, she goes into a shock. Her mind begins to evolve due to this single bite, while Ruvine thinks how she is eating in complete silence. Soon after, the little rabbits surround her, and she ends up giving one to every single rabbit as well. As expected, their minds begin to evolve after taking a bite of that cookie as well. Following that, she notices that there is only one cookie left, and simultaneously, Minotaur appears. The fairy tells him to eat some cookies as well. Seeing the candy, he advises everyone to properly thank Ruvine afterward. To his surprise, Ruvine then walks towards him and hands him the remaining cookie. After Minotaur accepts the candy, she begins to wonder whether he'll find it tasty or not. Shockingly, he splits the bunny's face in half, confusing Ruvine. However, he then hands one half to her, saying that they should eat it together. Ruvine ends up accepting it and quickly realizes that the inside of her mouth is getting sweeter than the cookie, so much so that she can't discern what it tastes like. Minotaur notices the weird expression on her face and gets a bit closer to ask if she's okay. This is enough to fluster Ruvine, and seeing the rabbit sitting behind her, she tries distracting Minotaur by showing him the bunny eating a bunny cookie. Just then, Minotaur tries to speak and ends up saying the word rabbit. At first, Ruvine looks at him in shock, followed by delight as Minotaur says his first word. He tries speaking again but ends up biting his tongue instead. Following that, he tells Fairy that he wanted to speak to Ruvine, which is why he learned some human words. The fairy replies that he won't need words if he's properly connected to her heart, similar to the fairy who knows that Ruvine is most likely complimenting her again. That night, Minotaur had a wet dream about Ruvine, but woke up due to the sound of someone chatting. Realizing that it's a human's voice, he decides to check it out and sees a wolf trying to talk to a human. The wolf tries to reassure the man that they are best friends and eventually lets the man go. He then notices Minotaur looking at him, causing Minotaur to freak out as well. Following that, the wolf walks up to Minotaur, asking if he was watching them and asks if he loves humans too. When Minotaur agrees, the wolf suggests getting to know each other and introduces himself as Hulf. Afterward, Hulf mentions that he learned human language to make new friends. Minotaur figures that Hulf must have a lot of human friends, and Hulf replies that humans are easy once you learn how to trick them. Furthermore, he agrees to teach Minotaur and invites him to the neighborhood forest. The next day, Ruvine once again appears in the forest and gets told by the fairy that Minotaur isn't present right now. But it's good, as now Ruvine can spoil the fairy 2 times more than usual. Meanwhile, he ends up learning a ton of words from Hulf and gets told that he should be able to talk to humans now. Additionally, he informs Hulf about Ruvine and mentions that she always blushes when she's with him. Hearing this cheers Hulf up, and he begins talking about how fascinating human expressions are. Minotaur agrees, saying that they are quite fascinating, which makes Hulf invite Minotaur to his cabin where his human friends are present. Minotaur wonders if it is okay for him to visit, and Hulf agrees. With that being said, the two of them arrive at the cabin and Hulf informs Minotaur that humans live inside this cabin. Furthermore, he mentions that this is a hunter's house who is someone who lives by hunting animals. Minotaur questions if that hunter is also his friend, to which Hulf agrees. With that being said, he opens the door, and as Minotaur steps into the cabin, the children inside realize their mistake, thinking that this is definitely not the candy van. Following that, Hulf lets Minotaur know that his hunter friend is no longer here, as it's been a while since he got promoted to lunch. Following that, he notices a man bring another kid along with him. Hulf congratulates him, telling that human that he is his best buddy and the 2 human kids he brought look pretty delicious. The human mentions that this marks a total of 10 people and asks him to give back his wife and child. However, Hulf replies that those 2 gave off a delectable face, so he ended up eating them as a side dish. Then, seeing the face that man is making causes Hulf to get excited, and he shows it to Minotaur, saying that this is why he loves humans. Even though men don't taste that great, if you slowly eat them alive, they'll cry and shout, and that look on their faces is the ultimate spice. Additionally, he allows Minotaur to eat one of them as well, considering they are friends. But to his surprise, Minotaur ends up punching him in the face, causing Hulf to crash onto the ground. Afterward, Hulf gets up and shouts at Minotaur, asking what is the meaning of this. Minotaur replies by thanking him for teaching him some words, but says that he can never forgive him. Hulf questions why he is angry, as humans are his friends, and being his friends, they should happily offer their bodies to him. But Minotaur disagrees, and Hulf mentions that the 2 of them are no longer friends. Before long, Hulf tries jumping on Minotaur, but Minotaur ends up smacking him in the face once again. This results in Hulf remembering yesterday when he first saw Minotaur. At that time, Minotaur was shaking in fear, which made Hulf believe that he was stronger, but currently, he can't understand why the hell is Minotaur this absurdly powerful. Additionally, he can't understand how he is making such a human face, even though he is a monster. While the 2 of them fight each other, the humans begin getting out of the cabin and start motivating Minotaur to do his best. They all begin calling Minotaur their hero, telling him to eliminate the wolf and avenge the people he ate. This comes as a surprise to Hulf, who can't believe they are supporting Minotaur even though they are his friends. He then remembers the time he made his first friend, who was a hunter that lived in the cabin. But one day, he heard him talking about their family running low on funds. This is when the hunter decided to sell off Hulf, as they could sell a speaking monster at a high price. Following that, Hulf entered the cabin, looking furious, and before the hunter got the chance to explain himself, Hulf devoured all of them. Because he got lonely, he made more friends and kept eating them, eventually realizing that eating friends isn't a bad thing. The hunter also tried selling him off, which is why he started seeing friends as objects. Back in the present, Hulf stands back up again, and this time, grabs his sword. He then charges at Minotaur, ready to strike him down, when out of nowhere, Ruvine appears. Seeing the girl standing in front of him, Hulf instantly recognizes her as the ultimate adventurer, Ruvine. Additionally, he is fully aware that he has no chance of winning with a sword, but that's only when talking about swords. Hulf then holds the sword with his mouth, imitating the green-haired guy he saw in One Piece. Seeing this, Ruvine also changes her stance, confusing Hulf as he believes that she's clearly out of range. Just then, she disappears out of sight and appears right next to him, managing to slash his chest. Minotaur also looks at him in shock as Hulf falls onto the ground. Ruvine then asks the kids if they are alright, and one of the girls informs her that Minotaur is the one who saved them. Meanwhile, Hulf starts thinking how painful it is and begins blaming Minotaur, saying that it is all his fault. Ruvine also ends up thanking Minotaur and informs everyone that the ruler of the forest fought and saved all the humans. To her surprise, Minotaur manages to thank her as well, making her realize that he is able to talk a bit more now. Seeing the two of them reminds Hulf of his hunter friend and thinks how Minotaur has everything he has ever wanted. After he passes away, Minotaur walks up to Hulf and grabs his body. Seeing this, Levi from Temu begins telling Ruvine to eliminate Minotaur as he is Hulf's friend and most likely trying to trick them as well. Furthermore, he says that Minotaur is acting as their ally and wants to eat them as soon as they lower their guards, but Ruvine reassures him that it's okay as Minotaur is her friend. That man couldn't believe what she is saying and mentions that Ruvine has been brainwashed as well. Then, he begins telling other humans to attack Minotaur as he is facing the other way, but no one moves and tells him to look at Minotaur. Apparently, he picks a flower and puts it on Hulf's grave, while that man mentions that his wife and child were eaten by that monster, and says that he would never trust a monster now. Soon after, the news about Minotaur saving humans spread in the town, and all the people were bewildered at the existence of this gentle, unknown monster. 2 days have passed since the incident, and the case regarding Minotaur protecting the humans was pretty unique. But everyone is still fawning over Ruvine for protecting the people. While some of them are asking for her autograph, the others are mocking her for not defeating Minotaur, saying that it's all lies about him protecting humans. However, one stare from her is enough to shut those people down, but still she is fully aware that even she thought of Minotaur as an enemy at first, and even if she explains it to the people, nobody will believe her. Just then, the girl Minotaur saved the other day grabs Ruvine's cape, and Ruvine also recognizes her as the girl present the other day. She then hands over a letter to Ruvine, asking her to give it to Minotaur. After that, the girl instantly books it while Ruvine stands there, looking confused. On the other hand, the fairy confronts Minotaur for looking down since yesterday and mentions that he's making the face of someone who just got stood up for a one-night stand. Later that day, Minotaur sits by the river and thinks about how he used his hands to beat the crap out of a friend. There might have been other ways to make him understand, but at the same time, he also believes that if he had met Hulf earlier, maybe nobody would have to go through that hardship. Even though there is no point thinking about it now, Minotaur can't help but think about it. The thought of him not being able to save anyone pisses him off, and he breaks the rock he's sitting on, causing him to fall into the river. Simultaneously, Ruvine passes by the river and notices the head of Minotaur sticking out of the water. After a moment of awkwardness, she lends her hand, asking Minotaur if he's okay. He ends up grabbing her hand, and when she tries to pull him out, Ruvine ends up falling into the river as well. After mocking him for being heavier than her mom, the two of them got out of the river, drenched. Ruvine also notices that he doesn't seem happy, and Minotaur questions if what he did to his friend was alright. This makes Ruvine take out the letter from her bag and tell Minotaur that it was given to her by that girl he saved the other day. Following that, she shows him the letter, saying that he was a hero to those kids. Seeing the letter brings tears in Minotaur's eyes, and he makes up his mind to never allow anyone to be unhappy. The next day, Ruvine sees Minotaur doing push-ups, and when she questions about what he's doing, Minotaur replies that he lacks muscles, which is why he's training. While Ruvine checks out his body that's built like a Greek god on steroids, Minotaur mentions that if he could get stronger, he could protect everyone. However, he is done training for the day and now wants to stay together with everyone and care for them. Additionally, he has something to show her and takes Ruvine to a cave where she notices the letter framed on the wall. But after looking at the letter for a moment, she can't figure out why it's sideways and realizes that the ornaments around it are also incredibly elaborate. She begins to wonder if Minotaur might be testing it sideways when out of nowhere, he asks Ruvine to tell him what the letter means. Ruvine stares at him with a blank expression on her face and begins to think if there could be a trick question behind this simple expression of gratitude. Afterward, the book catches her attention, and she picks it up, freaking out Minotaur. When she notices his acting weirdly, Ruvine mentions that it's a guidebook for love. This makes Ruvine realize that he doesn't even know the title of the book and wonders if he's illiterate. Additionally, she remembers that he confessed to her using the book and begins to think if he just showed her random pages of that book. Furthermore, the thought of it all being a misunderstanding strikes her, and she begins remembering everything she did. Not being able to withstand the embarrassment, she takes out her sword and digs a hole in the ground, later sitting in it and letting Minotaur know that she felt like jumping into a hole. However, Minotaur takes her out, saying that it's dangerous and asks if something happened. Ruvine eventually asks if the confession was a misunderstanding, and she elaborates, saying if there was no such thing as him liking her. When Minotaur replies, saying that this is not it, which makes Ruvine push him away and run as fast as she can. While both Minotaur and the fairy seem confused, Ruvine continues running, thinking how she misunderstood something about someone so important to him and thinks how she's the worst. Before long, Minotaur catches up to her and apologizes for appearing so suddenly. Furthermore, he tells Ruvine that because of her, his way of thinking has changed a little. Then, he grabs her by her shoulder and tells Ruvine that he can't describe his feelings with just the word like. As words are hard for him, he cannot describe them. However, Ruvine tells him to stop as if he keeps going, she might get embarrassed. Nonetheless, she ends up getting embarrassed anyway and Minotaur decides to tell her slowly from now on. A few days later, Minotaur notices a bag lying around and figures that Ruvine must have forgotten it there. The fairy suggests looking inside, and after taking a peek inside, she realizes that it's filled with extra large-sized rubber. Eventually, Minotaur decides to bring it back to Ruvine, and the fairy realizes that he plans on going to the human town. Furthermore, she mentions that it's pretty dangerous out there, and that she's not sure if humans will be understanding even if they talk to them. Nonetheless, Minotaur replies that he got stronger, so it'll be alright. Ultimately, the fairy gets tired of his persistent nature and tells him to go on his own. Soon after, Minotaur appears in the human town and notices everyone being scared of him. After seeing a couple of old farts, he decides to ask them about where Ruvine lives, but it only results in them both losing the few years left in their lives. Apparently, the fairy decided to tag along but stayed hidden. She quickly figures that humans will never tell him the direction, as she has noticed that only Ruvine is a human who's particularly kind. Nonetheless, Minotaur continues asking other people for directions, only to end up scaring them. Eventually, he sits by the roadside, depressed when a wagon comes accelerating towards him, and just in time, the fairy manages to push Minotaur out of the way. Then, a person steps out of the wagon and asks Minotaur if he's alright. All the baddies begin fawning over the hottie while Minotaur apologizes for blanking out. Noticing the popularity of that person, the fairy concludes that he must be a human boss, and is sure that he might eliminate them if needed. But to their surprise, the boy questions Minotaur if something is wrong and Minotaur asks him about where Ruvine lives. While the Minotaur and fairy begin to argue whether it was a good decision to ask him, the boy ends up telling him the direction. Minotaur thanks him, and after staring at him for a moment, the boy returns to his wagon and drives away. Now that they know the direction to Ruvine's house, the two of them arrive and knock on the door of her house. The fairy mentions that it'll be awkward if her mother comes out and begins imitating how she might act in front of Minotaur. Soon after, the door opens and Ruvine peeks out. After staring at Minotaur for a second, she notices how she currently looks and instantly closes the door, asking Minotaur to give her 3 minutes to get dressed. After some time, she opens the door once again and questions the reason behind his sudden visit. Furthermore, she begins to wonder if it'll be okay to invite him, but realizes that her house is a complete mess. Minotaur then hands her the bag, and she seems relieved afterward, saying that there's a pretty dangerous weapon inside of it. Additionally, she asks if he has checked inside, forcing Minotaur to apologize for his curious nature. Then, she asks how he ended up finding her house, to which Minotaur replies that a boss told him the direction. On the other hand, the boy enters his villa, and his assistant begins talking about the monster roaming around the town and wonders if it was Ruvine's friend. But the boy asks the old man to shut it as he's immersed in deep emotion. After the old man leaves, the boy lets out a sigh and mentions that Minotaur might be able to satisfy him, deciding to make him his own no matter what. Some days later, the fairy begins complaining that she's bored and mentions that Ruvine hasn't come by for a week now. Minotaur replies that she must be busy, causing the fairy to wonder if he did something suspicious to her at her house. Just then, the boy appears behind them and greets Minotaur, saying that it's been a while, calling Minotaur the ruler of the forest. The fairy once again freaks out and questions what Minotaur did that caused the human boss to appear. The boy mentions that Minotaur and the fairy seem close and how he thought that Minotaur would be a ferocious monster. But it seems like the animals and spirits of the forest are attached to him. Additionally, the entire forest is pretty peaceful, which makes it a truly wonderful place. Following that, the two of them look at each other in silence and Minotaur tells the fairy that he seems like a good guy. Then, the boy mentions that he came to the forest himself in secret and apologizes for not introducing himself sooner. He then calls himself the first prince named Shasro, saying that he is the man who will eventually become the human king. When Minotaur shakes his hand, he quickly notices that Shasro has quite a strong grip. Additionally, he notices that Shasro has the expression similar to a weeb touching a female for the first time, and notices that an intimidating aura is coming from him as well. Afterward, Shasro asks for Minotaur's name, and after he introduces himself, Shasro lets go of his hand and questions if Minotaur saved the human children with Ruvine the other day. For that, he thanks Minotaur, causing Minotaur to feel shy and embarrassed. Also, Shasro says that he felt like he needed to express his gratitude, but it wasn't easy meeting a monster like him, but it felt doable when he caught sight of him in the town. Following that, Shasro gives him an invitation letter to a party he's holding in the castle, saying that Ruvine will be present as well. After mentioning that something delightful will happen, Shasro gets on his horse and leaves. The fairy then mentions that Shasro seems dangerous as his breathing seems strange too. Furthermore, thinking about him inviting Minotaur to his castle makes the fairy believe that he might be trying to rizz up the beast. Nonetheless, he plans to go tomorrow, and the fairy decides to accompany him. As usual, everyone seems scared, but the fairy is prepared to protect Minotaur and to fight for him at all costs. After reaching the castle, the guard shows him the way inside, and there, he shows another guard the invitation letter. Just then, another guard whispers something into the ear of the first guard, making him allow Minotaur to go inside. Once inside, Minotaur notices that the room is filled with nobles, and as he begins walking forward, everyone starts to look at him. They start talking about how utterly fearsome Minotaur seems, making him realize that he sticks out like a sore thumb. Just then, a butler makes an announcement, asking everyone to celebrate together. Following that, Shasro steps out with his bride next to him, who is none other than Ruvine herself. Apparently, Shasro doesn't have any interest in Ruvine whatsoever, but the only thing he wants is for Minotaur to show his true colors. He is fully aware that Minotaur likes Ruvine, and if he can fight Minotaur, then the ends will justify the means. Apparently, a week ago, the news about Shasro getting married was announced in the town, and Ruvine couldn't figure out the reason she was summoned to the castle. This makes her wonder if she did something which ended up angering the prince. Nonetheless, after arriving at the castle, she was told by Shasro to marry her, which came as a shock to her. He further elaborated, saying that even though she was a commoner, she's still the hero of the country, and if he were to become the king with someone like her by his side, the people would put their support behind him as well. In the end, he mentions that this is for the sake of the country and that she has no right to refuse. After that, Shasro mentions that his ways might have been insensitive, and he should have at least confessed at first. This made Ruvine give him a serious glare, and Shasro reminded her that by marrying him, she could allow her family and Minotaur to live on happily. However, what he said might be inaccurate as her feelings for Minotaur go beyond friendship. When Ruvine questioned how he knew about it, Shasro replied that he's not actually a human being, but is practically close to one. Additionally, he mentioned that he has a lot of influence over the monsters as well. That is how he got information about Minotaur and others quickly. Following that, he questioned Ruvine if she could get together with Minotaur. Even if there's mutual love, discrimination from others will bring all sorts of hardships, and even if she can bear it, Minotaur might not be able to. Back in the present, just as the two of them are about to lock lips, Ruvine ends up landing a punch on his face, surprising Minotaur and everyone gathered around them. However, she still feels as if she didn't actually hit him, as Shasro was able to barely dodge her in the last second. Afterward, Ruvine asks Shasro the reason he summoned Minotaur, saying that it feels as if he's playing with a new toy with those childish, repulsive eyes of his. Furthermore, she doesn't buy the crap about him marrying her for the sake of the country and says that there must be some other goal. However, Shasro questions what will happen to her family and friends now, to which Ruvine replies that she will protect them herself while throwing the flower bouquet towards Shasro. She then runs towards him, trying to land another attack and tries kicking him, but Shasro manages to dodge and attacks back. Ruvine barely manages to block the attack, while Shasro mentions that she would only be able to defend her friends if she had a sword, but without it, can she really be called powerful? He adds that battles are always unpredictable, and that she would be powerless if her sword was damaged or lost. Ruvine replies that she might not be able to defeat a prince, but she is now fully aware that the country will go into turmoil if he becomes the king. Shasro replies that he has no interest in the country and yells at her for changing the topic. He then begins walking towards Ruvine and almost grabs her, but fails to do so as Minotaur ends up saving her in the nick of time. All the soldiers and nobles at the venue were bricked after seeing Shasro's elegant smile, which looked as if he had reunited with his lover, with the exception of Minotaur and Ruvine, of course. Minotaur then questions if Shasro doesn't like peace anymore, to which Shasro replies that if he had not talked about liking peace, then Minotaur wouldn't have come to fight him. Apparently, it's his hobby to fight monsters and gets excited whenever it happens. Ruvine asks Minotaur not to fight the prince, but Minotaur apologizes to Ruvine, saying that he cannot back away from this. The nobles can't believe that the prince will be fighting the monster, as he is muscular and over 2 meters tall. Following that, Shasro asks Minotaur if he enjoys art and mentions that if a human body could defeat a monster in the same condition, then that would be something called an art. Furthermore, to meet the same conditions, Shasro takes off his clothes, causing Ruvine to get disgusted over what she's seeing. With that being said, both of them take their fighting positions and Shasro begins hopping with his arms stretched out. Before long, he dashes towards Minotaur and tries landing a punch, but gets blocked, making him get behind Minotaur and land a punch on his back. This surprises everyone except for Ruvine, who saw how Shasro evaded Minotaur's counterattack by spinning backward and made use of the momentum to attack from the back. Even she realized that Shasro might be the strongest opponent Minotaur has ever fought. As the fight continues, Minotaur starts getting dominated by Shasro, who keeps slipping punches between the gaps. Ruvine notices that this is becoming one-sided for the prince, but she is sure that Minotaur still has a winning chance. Shasro took a form that prioritizes attacking instead of defending, and if Minotaur keeps on blocking, it creates blind spots, allowing Shasro to keep attacking. But as long as Minotaur even gets one hit, it'll be fatal. But she is unsure whether Minotaur will be able to land a hit before the prince brings him down. Suddenly, Minotaur ends up breaking his pinky finger, making the fairy freak out and question why Minotaur is fighting instead of escaping with them. While the nobles wonder what just happened, Ruvine knows that it was an elbow strike, and if Minotaur's punch were to directly hit Shasro's elbow, it would have shattered it. But Shasro somehow struck with his elbow before the punch and targeted his pinky, causing Minotaur to disable his dominant arm. The attack that Shasro is cautious of is not a strike, but being grabbed, as he won't be able to escape from Minotaur's grasp. But now that Minotaur's dominant arm is disabled, Shasro has shifted to an attack-centric style. He continues landing more and more punches on Minotaur, making everyone realize that it's a one-sided assault. Do you think Minotaur will be able to defeat the prince? Comment Minotaur if you'd like part 2 of this series. As usual, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next one.